My name is Ryan Walker. I was 29 years old when I accepted a job that nobody else wanted. A fire watch tower, high in the mountains of western Montana. The nearest town was almost 40 miles away. No neighbors, no cell service, just endless forest stretching to the horizon. The pay was surprisingly good. My only job was to watch for wildfires during the night, answer emergency calls, and report anything unusual. It sounded easy. At least, that's what I thought. When I arrived, the day guard was already waiting outside. His name was Tom. He looked exhausted. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and he hadn't shaved in days. As he handed me the keys, he didn't smile. Instead, he asked one strange question. Do you believe people can disappear without leaving a trace? I laughed. I guess anything's possible. He didn't laugh back. Up here, he said quietly, don't answer the phone after 3:33 a.m. I frowned. What if it's an emergency? Tom looked toward the endless forest. If it rings after 3:33, they're not calling for help. Without another word, he climbed into his truck and drove away. I was completely alone. The tower was old. Every step made the wooden floor creak. A small radio sat beside the desk. A pair of binoculars. 8 security cameras surrounded the tower. Everything seemed normal. At 11:47 p.m., I made my first log entry. Clear skies. No smoke. No activity. Midnight passed without a single incident. At 1:15 a.m., an owl landed on the railing outside. At 2:02 a.m., a family of deer crossed the road below. Nothing unusual. I started wondering if Tom had simply been trying to scare the new guy. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the old landline telephone rang. The sound echoed through the empty tower. Once, twice, 3 times. I stared at it. Tom's warning echoed in my head. Don't answer the phone after 3:33 a.m. The ringing stopped. I smiled to myself. Maybe that was the test. Then the phone rang again. This time, it wouldn't stop. I kept staring at the phone. The ringing echoed through the tiny tower, bouncing off the wooden walls. It wasn't loud. It was patient, as if whoever was calling knew I would eventually give in. After almost a minute, I picked up the receiver. I didn't say a word. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard someone breathing. Slow, uneven. It sounded like a woman trying not to cry. Finally, she whispered, "Please, I think I'm lost." Her voice trembled. "I've been walking for hours." I swallowed hard. "Where are you?" She answered immediately. "I don't know. I only see trees." And, she paused. "I can see your tower." A chill ran down my spine. I rushed to the window. The powerful floodlights illuminated the ground around the tower. Nothing. No person. No flashlight. No movement. Only endless forest. I picked up the binoculars and searched the trees. Still nothing. "Can you see my light?" I asked. "No, I only see the tower." Her breathing became faster. "Something is following me." Branches cracked somewhere on her end of the call. Heavy footsteps. Not hers. Much heavier. Then she whispered. It stopped walking. I tightened my grip on the phone. "What stopped?" She didn't answer. For almost 10 seconds, all I could hear was the wind. Then, she whispered again. "It's looking at me." Suddenly the line filled with loud static. A deep voice, far lower than hers, spoke into the receiver. "Don't let her in." The call disconnected. I slowly lowered the phone. Before I could think, one of the security monitors beeped. Camera 6. Motion detected. The camera overlooked the dirt road leading to the tower. I looked at the screen. A woman was standing there. Perfectly still. She was staring directly at the tower. Exactly where the voice had claimed she would be. I froze. The woman hadn't been there a second ago. She stood in the middle of the dirt road wearing a long gray coat. Her dark hair covered most of her face. She wasn't moving. She wasn't waving for help. She was simply staring at the tower. I grabbed the binoculars again. The road below was empty. No woman. Nothing. I lowered the binoculars and looked back at the monitor. She was still there, exactly where she had been before. My heart started pounding. Slowly, the woman lifted one arm. She pointed toward the forest behind her. Then the camera filled with static. When the picture returned, she was gone. Every monitor suddenly flashed at the same time. Warning: camera connection lost. One by one, all 8 cameras went black. The tower became completely blind. A loud crack echoed from somewhere below. It sounded like a branch snapping. Then another, closer. Heavy footsteps circled the base of the tower. Not one pair, several. Slow, deliberate. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I turned off the lights inside the tower and carefully looked through the window. The darkness outside swallowed everything. Then, I saw it. Between the trees, dozens of tiny white lights appeared. At first I thought they were flashlights. But they weren't moving like people. They floated, perfectly still, watching. 1, 5, 10, 20. More lights appeared deeper in the forest. Soon there were too many to count. My radio suddenly crackled. Tom's voice came through the speaker. Weak, broken. Ryan, if you can hear me, whatever you do, don't count the lights. Too late. I had already started counting. The moment I realized it, every single light moved at once. Straight toward the tower. Every light rushed through the trees with impossible speed. Not running, not flying, gliding. Within seconds, they reached the edge of the clearing below the tower. Then they stopped. Every single light went out at once. The forest became silent. Too silent. No wind, no insects, no birds. It felt as if the entire mountain had stopped breathing. My radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't Tom. A calm male voice spoke. Rule number 1. If you lose sight of the lights, close every curtain immediately. I looked around the tower. There were curtains covering every window. I hadn't even noticed them before. Without wasting another second, I ran from window to window, pulling each curtain shut. The last one covered the door window. The tower was now completely sealed. Only the emergency lamp above the desk gave off a faint yellow glow. Then, something knocked on the wooden stairs outside. One knock, another. Slow footsteps began climbing toward the tower. Step, step, step. The staircase wrapped around the outside of the tower, so I couldn't see who, or what, was climbing. The steps continued, closer, closer. Then they stopped, right outside the door. Silence. A gentle knock echoed through the wood. Knock, knock, knock. Then a familiar voice spoke. Ryan, it was Tom. I forgot to tell you one last rule. I slowly backed away from the door. Tom had driven away hours ago. There was no way he could have returned without me seeing his truck. The voice came again. Open the door. You'll be safer if you let me in. I said nothing. The handle slowly turned by itself. Once, twice. Then it stopped. A long pause followed. Finally, the voice outside laughed. It no longer sounded like Tom. It sounded like dozens of people laughing together. At that exact moment, the telephone rang again. The display showed only 2 words. Unknown forest. The phone continued ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. I stared at the display. Unknown forest. My hand hovered above the receiver. Every instinct told me not to answer. But curiosity was stronger than fear. I picked it up. Hello. For several seconds, nothing. Then I heard the same woman. She was crying harder than before. Ryan, please. I found the tower. My blood froze. I slowly turned toward the door. Nobody was there. The staircase outside was empty. I don't see you, I whispered. You will. Her breathing became shaky. He knows you're listening. Who? I asked. She never answered. Instead, I heard leaves crunching beneath slow footsteps. Not one pair, many. The woman began whispering so quietly I could barely understand her. They're gathering. They always gather before sunrise. Then, she screamed. A deafening scream exploded through the receiver. The line filled with static. When it cleared, a man's voice spoke. Cold, calm, emotionless. You answered twice. You were warned. The call ended. At that exact moment, every curtain around the tower began moving. Not because of the wind. Something outside was pulling on them. One by one, slowly, as if dozens of hands were feeling the windows from the outside. I backed away until I reached the center of the room. The wooden walls creaked. Then, a loud thud came from the roof. Something had landed above me. It was heavy enough to shake the entire tower. Another thud. Then another. Whatever it was walking across the roof. Slowly, deliberately, directly toward the trapdoor leading into the observation room. Then it stopped. Complete silence. A single scrape echoed overhead. It sounded like long fingernails dragging across old wood. The scratching continued, slow, patient, almost curious. Then, 3 slow knocks came from directly above my head. Knock, knock, knock. A whisper followed. Ryan, open the hatch. I looked up. The trapdoor handle slowly began to turn. I couldn't breathe. The metal handle turned another inch. Then another. Whoever, or whatever, was on the roof wasn't forcing its way in. It was opening the hatch as if it already knew it belonged there. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find. A heavy fire axe mounted beside the emergency cabinet. My hands shook as I held it. The hatch stopped moving. Silence. 5 seconds passed. 10. Then a voice drifted down through the wooden ceiling. Soft, almost friendly. Ryan, you've been watching the forest. Now, the forest is watching you. The emergency lights flickered. Once, twice. Then every monitor powered back on at the same time. I rushed to the desk. All 8 cameras were working again. But none of them showed the forest. Camera 1 showed the tower. Camera 2 showed the tower. Camera 3, the tower. Every screen displayed the same image from a different angle. The building I was standing inside. Then I noticed something impossible. On camera 4, a man stood inside the observation room. He was holding a fire axe. He looked exactly like me. He stared directly into the camera. I slowly looked around the room. I was alone. When I looked back, the man on the monitor smiled. Then he raised one hand. Slowly, he pointed toward the trapdoor above him. A loud bang exploded overhead. The hatch flew open. I spun around, raising the axe. Nothing. Only darkness above. Then dirt began falling through the opening. Leaves. Small branches. Cold air. It smelled like wet earth after rain. The smell grew stronger, as if an entire forest were somehow hanging upside down above the tower. Then something long and black slowly reached over the edge of the hatch. It wasn't a hand. It had far too many fingers. And every finger ended in claws. The claws gripped the edge of the hatch. One by one, slowly, patiently. Whatever was above me wasn't in a hurry. It knew there was nowhere for me to run. The fingers were far too long to belong to a human. Thin, black, covered in bark-like skin, as if they had grown from the trees themselves. Then another hand appeared. Then another. 4 hands, all gripping the opening. Something began pulling itself into the tower. I raised the axe with both hands. Stay back, I shouted. The creature stopped moving. For several seconds, it remained perfectly still. Then, it laughed. Not loudly, not violently. Just a quiet laugh that sounded like branches scraping against each other in the wind. Suddenly the radio burst to life. Ryan. It was Tom. This time his voice sounded clear. Listen carefully. That isn't trying to get inside. It's trying to make you look up. I froze. Don't look above its hands. No matter what happens, don't look at its face. The claws suddenly released the hatch. Silence. Then something heavy landed on the floor behind me. I spun around instinctively. Nothing. The room was empty. Another laugh echoed from somewhere else. It wasn't above me anymore. It was inside the walls. The tower groaned as if the wood itself were alive. Then every monitor changed again. Instead of showing the tower, they showed the forest. Except it wasn't today's forest. The trees were burned black. Smoke covered the ground. Hundreds of dark figures stood between the dead trees. None of them moved. The radio whispered one final sentence. Ryan, that's tomorrow. Every screen suddenly switched back to normal. Outside, the first faint orange glow appeared on the horizon. Sunrise was close. Then the telephone rang one last time. The display didn't show unknown forest anymore. This time it showed only one word. Tom. The phone rang 3 more times. I stared at the screen. Tom. This had to be impossible. Tom had left hours ago. Slowly, I answered. Ryan. It was his voice. Calm. Tired. Real. Listen to me carefully, he said. You only have a few minutes before sunrise. What is this place? I asked. There was a long silence. Then Tom sighed. The forest isn't haunted. It is hungry. What does that mean? For years, people disappeared in these mountains. Hikers, hunters, campers. They were never found because they never died. My stomach tightened. They became part of it. I looked toward the trees outside. The first rays of sunlight were beginning to touch the tops of the pines. The tower wasn't built to watch for fires, Tom continued. It was built to watch the forest. A loud crack echoed below. The entire tower shook. The staircase groaned as if something enormous had slammed into it. They know sunrise is coming, Tom said. They'll try one last time. The windows exploded with noise. Hundreds of hands struck the glass at once. Bang, bang, bang. The curtains shook violently. The walls creaked. Something screamed from the forest. It wasn't an animal. It sounded almost human. Then dozens of voices joined in. Ryan, Ryan, Ryan. They all knew my name. The tower trembled. Cracks spread across the floorboards. Dust filled the air. I thought the whole structure was about to collapse. Then, a single beam of sunlight broke through the clouds. It landed across the doorway. The screaming stopped instantly. The pounding ended. Silence. Slowly, I pulled one curtain aside. The clearing was empty. No figures. No lights. No footprints. Nothing. The forest looked peaceful again. The phone crackled one last time. Tom spoke quietly. You survived. But tonight, you'll understand why nobody keeps this job for long. The line went dead. An hour later, Tom's truck climbed the mountain road. He stepped out carrying 2 cups of coffee. He looked at me and smiled. You stayed. I almost didn't, I admitted. Tom nodded. They all say that after the first night. He handed me a folded envelope. Across the front, written in faded black ink, were the words, "Second night rules." I looked up. I'm done. Tom's smile faded. He slowly pointed toward the forest. At the edge of the trees, a lone figure stood watching the tower. The woman from the phone. She wasn't crying anymore. She simply smiled. Tom spoke without looking at her. If you leave now, she'll follow you home. The morning sun was bright. The birds were singing. Everything looked normal. But I finally understood something. The safest place on the mountain was the place I had spent all night trying to escape. The end. For now.